So I'm going to get us started by thanking our Allegheny County Executive, Sarah Murado, for coming, and she'd like to say a few words of welcome. Sarah?
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you, Doug and Pittsburgh Tomorrow, for convening us for this very timely and important conversation. So I wanted to come up here tonight and just address you for a few minutes because you have this incredible panel to hear from. But it's not as someone who is in the news, but a consumer of news, someone who knows that our community needs news to be able to thrive. So the recent announcement of the shuttering of the Post-Gazette is a profound loss for our region. And it's not just a loss because of the legacy of the Post-Gazette or deep history it has with Pittsburgh or even the jobs. All of those are big losses. But it's a loss because a vibrant local journalism ecosystem is essential to democracy. Local journalists, you keep government accountable, you keep me accountable. It helps people understand what's going on in our community. It's our civic record. It gives us a history of who we are and what we are becoming. And as county executive, my goal is to create county for all, you've all heard before, but really, we can't do that if we don't have a timely and truthful news ecosystem. The community needs to be safe, connected, and thriving, and it needs news that it can trust. We need communities in its entirety to be covered. That's how we create a thriving region. And I'll do what most politicians don't do. I will say I do not have the answers, that's for sure. And I do understand that there needs to be separation between a free press and public power. But, even though I might not like the questions you all ask me or the photos that you choose to use, I am here to advocate for a strong local news ecosystem because we all need to come together in this moment. This moment demands creativity and partnership and serious public engagement so that we can sustain journalism that functions in the public's interest. So I care about the industry succeeding here. It's necessary for democracy. The public needs it. And I believe that journalists deserve a career that don't leave them fighting for scraps. So thank you for allowing me to join you. Thank you for caring about the future of local news and for continuing to insist that accountability, truth, and community can and will thrive here in Pittsburgh.
By the way, it's just possibly conceivable that not everyone got here in time. So if you guys, in case people come in, would we mind scooting towards the middle so that latecomers can grab the edge seats? Thanks. Next, I'd like to introduce my friend and our co-host for the evening, Andy Masick, who's not only the CEO of this great history center, but he is the person who, certainly along with a lot of help, he would tell you, has really built the Heinz History Center into what has been, for 2 years in a row, judged the best history center in America. Andy, could you join us for a minute?
Thanks, everyone. So glad you're here. The Heinz History Center, believe it or not, is Pittsburgh's oldest cultural institution. It started in 1879 as the Historical Society of Western Pennsylvania. But now it's the largest history museum in Pennsylvania. And thanks, Doug, 2 years in a row, USA Today says this is the best history museum in America. Our mission is to learn from the past so we can make better decisions in the present and plans for the future. That's the whole thing right there in a nutshell. And I find that reporters and publishers of newspapers and other news networks, they're really historians. They're just doing late-breaking history. And then we take care of the rest. We preserve it here, and then we help interpret that history and share it with others so they can make better decisions in the present and plans for the future. I'm not going to do any history tonight, but looking out that window, I saw the frozen Allegheny, and I thought back 1753, young George Washington scampered across the ice there at about 40th Street to Shanapin's Town. That's where Delaware Indian Village was, under the sachem Shanapin. And those Delawares had lived here for 100, maybe 200 years earlier. They got their news from runners who came in from other villages. Griots or criers would share the news with the people in the village. 33 years after George Washington scampered across that ice as a 21-year-old, two more 21-year-olds came from Philadelphia. John Scull and Joseph Hall, young guys, hauled this hand printing press across the Allegheny Mountains. Can you imagine that 6-week journey that they made from Philadelphia? We groused when it takes us 6 hours to get to Philadelphia. But these guys hauled on mules that printing press and started the first newspaper here. Well, we're at a critical juncture, and I hope that tonight with this panel and with your input, we can start to think about the future of newspapers, of news in general, and how we get to the truth, as Sarah Inama just said. So thank you all for being here, and we'll see you later.
Thanks, Andy. It's always great. Again, it's a situation where it's so important, urgent. We might not have come out on a night like this, but it is, and we are. So everyone here is concerned about Pittsburgh and journalism. And everyone here is a consumer of news, which of course makes everyone here an expert. But I wanted to mention something as we think about tonight in the future. That it's a quote from Aristotle, not to be too obtuse, that rings true and truer the older I get, certainly about life, but also about journalism. That is, everybody has a piece of the truth. The trouble comes when they think their piece of the truth is the whole truth. So, my name is Doug Heuck. I started Pittsburgh Tomorrow with the mission of stopping 40 years of metropolitan area population losses by reinvigorating the economy and the civic spirit. We have all the ingredients, and frankly, for the first time in a long time, we have a real sense of momentum here, even though everything's frozen. You can feel that kind of kinetic energy that's bubbling with it. Yeah, the new leadership with the draft, the airport, all sorts of things. The idea of losing a newspaper that started in 1786, the first newspaper west of the Alleghenies, is a problem, and the challenge of finding a solution that fits squarely within the mission of Pittsburgh Tomorrow. So I've also, aside from that, I've also been a journalist here for almost 41 years. I spent 20 years in the newsroom of the Pittsburgh Press and the Post-Gazette, and as an investigative reporter and a business editor. And when I walked into that little building, it's been abandoned for 15 years in the far end of the Boulevard of the Allies, there was a bust, a bronze bust of E.W. Scripps, who started the press, and under it were these words: "Give light and the people will find their own way." So tonight, what we're doing is we're attempting to do just that. We're on a fact-finding mission. And we want to see if we can find a way forward to solve this problem. We've got a great panel, and I want to introduce them alphabetically, and we'll get right into the questions. So, in number one, seems to have to be number one. Jim Boose is the CEO and publisher of the Pittsburgh Jewish Chronicle. Andrew Conti, Managing Director, Center for Media Innovation at Point Park. Rod Doss, Editor and Publisher of the Pittsburgh Courier. Louis Stabergas, Executive Editor, Trip Total Media. Megan Harris, host of CityCast Pittsburgh. Terry O'Reilly, President and CEO of Pittsburgh Community Broadcasting Corporation. Evan Rosenberg, Publisher and Market President, Pittsburgh Business Times, and Hallie Stockton, Editor-in-Chief of Public Source. So it's a big group, and we're gonna, hopefully, we've got a lot of questions from people that registered, and we're gonna hopefully keep the answers as journalists succinct. It'll be a challenge, but it's a big topic, so we're gonna dive right in. We have received 25 questions. One of them from Rebecca Luthor kind of gets to the central point. How can we ensure we have credible, transparent voices telling our region's stories moving forward and a place to learn about and connect our region? So that's a good starting thing. It's not our first real question to the panel, though. If we're going to try and solve the problem, let's first diagnose how serious it is. And so tonight's first question for each of you, and we're going to start with you, Jim, and then move down the line, is what is your opinion of the nature and seriousness of the void that will be created if the Post-Gazette disappears in early May? In other words, what exactly are we in danger of losing? Jim?
Thank you. I'd actually like to start with just a short anecdote to kind of put a framework around the problem. Because the problem is not just a void if the Post-Gazette goes away. That is a problem, but it's really a bigger problem. A number of years ago, I was at a candidate forum, someone running for political office, and I asked the candidate, where do you get your news? And I was really shocked at the answer. Someone running for public office said, well, mostly I get it from social media with my friends. Once in a while, I read the Post-Gazette, and that's about it. And the problem is not just the void that the Post-Gazette will leave, which I'll talk about in a second. The problem is that people are getting what they think is news, what they consider to be news, from a whole host of sources which are not, on balance, on average, reliable and credible. And the internet, first with search, and now with social media, and even now more so with artificial intelligence, is driving people to little rabbit holes of reinforcing things that build on their prejudice, that build hatred, divisiveness, that take them away from the truth, away from credible news. And what do we fight that with? Well, we fight that with a healthy news ecosystem, a credible, good journalism in the city, in the metropolitan area. And what do you have? Well, you have a mosaic, right? You have a whole host, and Pittsburgh has over 20 in the greater Pittsburgh region, news publishers, many of whom are focusing on some slice of something, a geographic slice or a slice of the community. The Pittsburgh Jewish Chronicle, we focus on the Jewish community. The Courier focuses on the Black community. Somebody else is focusing on the Mon Valley, the queer community, whatever. All of that is terrific, and that serves those people with the information that they need and want. It gives voice to their perspective. But the center of the mosaic is the daily news publisher. And I don't even want to say newspaper, because frankly, it doesn't really matter that much if it's digital or paper. But it has to be the comprehensive, universal standard bearer for news, covering all segments of the community, all peoples, all identities, all geographies, all topics. And that becomes the common link that gives people a common base for understanding what's going on in their world. If that goes away, it weakens this mosaic immeasurably. I mean, everything that we're doing, those of us who are doing specialized niches, is still terrific, but we rely on the Post-Gazette. We don't cover everything that they do. We rely on them for what they do, and we value their perspective, which, despite some of the naysayers, is not far extreme right or left. It's actually kind of balanced. They have things that cover all bases, and critical of Democrats and Republicans, and that gives me as a citizen and as a publisher, a sense of the city and what kind of information we need to know and we need to serve. If the Post-Gazette does go out of business and disappears, if there's not a credible, viable, mutual, comprehensive replacement, this city, this region will suffer. Not tomorrow, but over time. The government will not perform. People won't know where to go, what to do, and it will suffer and it will be poorer for it.
Thanks, Jim. Andy?
So let me play off of that a little bit. The national narrative since these announcements, and I would say too, it's not, we're talking about the Post-Gazette, but the first blow was City Paper, right? I mean, those of us who yeah, right, let's talk about that. City Paper's already, that was basically already out of work. So City Paper and now the Post-Gazette might be closing. The national narrative is that now Pittsburgh's a news desert. We live in a place where there's no local news at all. What we do at the Center for Media Innovation, we have two big projects. One of them is we bring together the funders who support local news. That's 5 foundations that are significant in that space. It's Venture, Heinz, Hillman, Pittsburgh Foundation, and Positive Foundation. Those foundations alone have invested $21 million over the past 5 years into local news initiatives. But the other project we worked on is the Pittsburgh Media Partnership. And at great risk of getting a little bit underdressed tonight, I thought I would wear my message on my sweatshirt. Yeah, all right, so I'm going to show you the back. Our partnership includes 35 news outlets, including City Paper and the Post-Gazette. And it's just important for us to remember that while everything Jim said is true, that there will be a loss to this community, and I think what our county executive said about the cultural loss in the community is significant. It's also important to remember that there are still hundreds of journalists working in this community at these news organizations telling our stories. And I would add to that in this moment, it's not enough to just say, well, this is the media's problem to figure out. This is the journalist's problem to figure out. This is all of our problem to figure out. And there's a call for all of us to be part of the solution. So
Great, thanks, Andy. By the way, Pittsburgh Quarterly, I hope, is on the back of that. Rod?
Thank you, Doug. One of the first thoughts I had when I heard the news about the Post-Gazette was, where is our next Pulitzer Prize Journalism Award coming from? Think about that for a second. Because we're dealing in an arena where journalists are greatly affected as well. They compete. They compete with one another. If you doubt that, just come and to the Press Club's Golden Foot Awards. You'll see all the competition that exists between journalists, photographers, videographers throughout the city of Pittsburgh and the surrounding area. You know, we talk about what's happening with the readership, but clearly, what's happening with people whose trade is, whose life is journalism. That's also something we have to deal with. And I'm concerned from that standpoint because I'm surrounded by people, and always have been surrounded by people who take their work seriously. That's a tremendous loss to them because they approach their job sometimes with very little pay, and at the same time, great enthusiasm, great pride. So it's not to be, I don't want anyone to lose sight of the fact that it's not just the community that will suffer with the loss of the Post-Gazette. It is the professional journalists, photographers, and the people who are actively engaged on a day-to-day basis, gathering the news. And they do it skillfully, with pride and integrity. Let's start there.
Thank you, Rod. Louise?
You know, to say, as a journalist in Pittsburgh for 30 years, I love the fact that this room is filled. And I love that there's so much interest in our profession and what we do. So that's terrific. Thank you for being here. And also, to get started, I want to acknowledge my friends and colleagues at the Post-Gazette. If you guys know, many of the current Post-Gazette reporters and editors have come through the Trib newsroom, and we kind of always kind of share reporters and jump from the Trib to the PG, and we have currently some former PG staffers on our staff. And the truth is, we share the passion, we share the responsibility to create impactful journalism for the city of Pittsburgh. That's not lost on me. And when we lose an institution like the Post-Gazette, we all lose because we love to have that sense of competition, that spirit of who gets the story first, and it makes us all better. Over the years, we've been in that situation where, who got the story first? Sometimes they do, sometimes we do, and it makes us all better. At the Trib, we take a lot of pride in that sense of responsibility. We currently have the largest newsroom in the city of Pittsburgh with more than 80 people. The company as a whole has 200 plus people. We consider ourselves one of the largest employers in some of the communities that we serve. We take that responsibility to produce journalism very seriously, and we've been doing that for years. I actually remember, as a medical reporter, covering the cancer battle of then Mayor Bob O'Connor, who, as many of you know, is the father of the current mayor, Corey O'Connor. And I'm just saying that just to not date myself, just to give you the context of that we've been around. Andy and I used to work on investigations of the Trib for many years, covering, organ transplantation at University of Pittsburgh. I see that Chancellor Norton is here, so I think it's great that there's interest in journalism from him and others. But my point is, the Trib understands this moment. The Trib is stepping up. We are currently expanding our operation more into Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. Our leadership has decided that it is important for us to hire more journalists to do that job. I've actually spent this entire week looking at resumes and interviewing people, and let me tell you guys, there's a lot of really good journalists out there who are looking for jobs, and hopefully we can hire them and allow them to have a voice and continue this important work of having true, impactful journalism in Pittsburgh.
Thanks, Luis. Megan?
There's a joke that I think a lot of us like to say, especially in the journalism community, that most of us were at minimum raised by the Trib. So many of us have come through the Tribune Review newsroom. I echo a lot of what my fellow panelists have said here already. There are 2 points I guess I would add. Number one, I feel like the Post-Gazette for a long time, for many of us up here, and probably many of you sitting out there, the PG is the yardstick by which many of us measure our own work. That's not necessarily the fault or even to the credit of the people that work there, but they have the reach, they have the brand, and they have this built reputation, totally earned. That means that we know that if we can't get to every single detail of the story, it's okay, because other outlets have. And often that outlet has been, for hundreds of years, the Post-Gazette. So to lose that is a tremendous hurt to the community. The other piece that I would add is the loss of talent. I think a lot of us have felt that perhaps more acutely than others here in Pittsburgh. Watching the strike play out as it has for the last 3.5 years, watching our colleagues leave town because it is difficult to be off work for such an enormous amount of time, to make decisions for their family, wherever you fall on the labor dispute as it was, we lost a lot of people. They took other jobs in our community, which is great. I love that. But some of them left. A lot of young people left. 20-something journalists that need to know where the bodies are buried now. So when they're 30 and 40 and 50, they can help the next generations. They can point to something and say, oh, I remember this. You need to call this guy. He retired 10 years ago. It doesn't matter. Get him on the phone. He'll tell you everything. If you lose that now, and we have lost a lot of that through the course of the strike, but if we lose an outlet like the Post-Gazette, which I believe their newsroom, I'm so sorry, Louise employs about 100 people. If we lose that, that's so much knowledge and lived experience in our community that's suddenly gone. and can't inform all of the stories that we collectively need to be hearing for the next 200 years. It's got such a cascading effect, and it devastates me to think that we're not going to have that as a backbone for everything that everyone else, all 40 plus other outlets in our community, are able to provide.
Thank you. Thank you. I would just say one thing. Don't stop at 50. It's still 60 and even 70. Terry?
Absolutely.
Andy, if I knew you were going to wear, we're really good at sweatshirts, t-shirts, tote bags, all that kind of stuff. So if I known you were going to do that, I would have made a shot at it. My name's Terry, and I'm a recovering journalist. I don't know that you ever recover from journalism. I gave up my pen and paper and all of that a decade or so ago, maybe a little bit more than that. And I've been blessed to be back here at Pittsburgh for 10 years to take a startup public radio station that started to dabble in news and turn it into an outlet that last year generated more than 3,000 pieces of original journalism. And every month, reaches hundreds of thousands of people in digital and another hundreds of thousands on the broadcast side. And the loss of the Post-Gazette is an extraordinary loss in a lot of different ways. And it's hard to remember 6 in line sometimes because all the good lines are done. I think we all know the impact of the loss of the content and the loss of the journalists. But I think we also have to think psychically about who we are as a community and the role that a daily newspaper, which I guess is the old term for whatever is going to emerge in the future, the role that central civic enterprise plays in the minds of all the people who live in a community like ours. 130 independent governmental entities in Allegheny County alone. Who's going to stitch all of that together? Where are the things that bring us a common identity that allow us to think of ourselves as being of a region rather than being of the little town I live in? More than 700 communities in an 11-county area. What is it that we have in common? How can we have confidence that we actually know what's important that's happening a community away or a mile away or 10 miles away? When we lived in towns of 300 people, it was pretty easy to know what was going on. When you live in a community of 2.3, 2.4 million people, the loss of a central enterprise that stands for journalism, that sort of is something people identify with and that they trust, and at the end of the day, they feel like they own pieces of it, even though they have to pay for it. The loss of that is really consequential. And so I'm not playing down the loss of the journalism, but to Andy's point earlier, there's a lot of great journalism in this town. Anybody who thinks this is a news desert is missing the point. There's lots of great journalism here. We may have navigation problems in getting people to the right journalism sometimes, but there's plenty of great journalism here. What I am concerned at my core about is something that somebody said to me last week. They said, I was talking to somebody from out of town, and they said, so if Pittsburgh loses its daily newspaper, it'll be the largest city in the United States that doesn't have a daily paper. And I said, well, I guess that's how you define paper, but yeah, I guess it would be. He said, you know what else that makes Pittsburgh? I said, I don't. He said, it makes Pittsburgh the biggest second-rate city in the country because it doesn't have a paper. So think about that, and think about what we can do about that. I can tell you that as an organization, I came here 10 years ago waiting for this day because we felt it was coming. I don't think it's a surprise to me. The question is who's going to step up with us? And we can't see you all because the lights are in our eyes. But we're looking to see who else is going to stand up. We're going to stand up for it. The question is, will you all stand up, and will all the rest of those people who are part of that community that we try to glue together, are they all going to stand up for us as well?
Thanks, Terry. Evan Rosenberg.
Thanks, Doug. I think it's tough being 6, 7.
You guys are going to go.
Yeah, very little to say.
At the end, you guys are going to be first.
Yeah, we appreciate that.
Shall be first.
So much of what I was probably going to say has been said. I will just touch on a couple of points. Loss of journalists, a real problem. Bench strength and people in the craft and doing the work every day, having fewer opportunities for them, that is a problem. The narrative in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, to Terry's point, largest metropolitan area without daily newspapers, there is a palpable, as Doug alluded to, enthusiasm, I think, in the region, at least in the business community, that hasn't been felt since pre-pandemic. Right, that's not a great headline that says no daily newspaper, like, right, because it just presents questions for people. I think the question that I've have most often beyond is the Business Times going to start carrying obituaries and box scores? And the answer is no to both of those things, by the way. The question has been, were you surprised? Were you surprised? Was your staff surprised? I was surprised when I got out of the meeting that I was in and glanced at my phone and had a text from our editor, Jennifer Bean, that said, the Post-Gazette will be ceasing operations on May 3rd. I was shocked in that moment, but I wasn't shocked, right? Anybody who's paying attention to it, anybody who understands the math a little bit, labor issues and all of the rest of it, it wasn't a matter sort of when, but the shock was in that moment. What we all do about it, what those of us assembled here can do about it, and many of you here tonight, as I see faces that I recognize, that's what we need to figure out. And it has ping-ponged in my brain a lot, as it likely has in yours. But we know that common voice that leaves us together is really critically important. And I'm hopeful that this group assembled here and out there this evening can be part of that solution.
Thanks. Hallie Stockton.
I think somebody gave the analogy or in a conversation of it's like having a chronically ill loved one and you know that it's not going well, but you're still kind of surprised in that moment. And, you know, I grew up on newspapers. I still have the metal print from the first time that I published something in like first or second grade. It was really bad. 3 sentences, but I was proud of it. And I built my early career in that medium, and I really feel for the people who are at the PG and who are and at City Paper who have already faced or are facing closure. And I think everyone has said a lot of the concerns about this being a civic core. And we agree with that. We agree that that there is also an ecosystem here that people have already been using for a long time to get their information. And news consumption, those habits are changing, and we are kind of needing to change with that. And we need to help our audiences do that. We need to be thinking about, and at Public Source, we're focusing a lot of our energy on how destabilizing this actually may feel for a lot of people, especially longtime residents, for residents and readers. And so we're thinking a lot about like, how can we do deep listening, continue to do deep listening to help guide us through this, to help guide us journalists through this. We need to be listening to community members. Well, how are you actually using all the information sources that are out there? What do you need? What has been lacking? Because the reality is that there have been challenges in this industry for a long time. And some of that is because we're not listening to you enough. And so there are a lot of things we can do there. Public Source is going to be flipping the script on this a bit. We're glad that everybody wants to come here and listen to the journalists, but we want to set up a series of listening sessions where we're going to be inviting community members out to listen to you and inviting all journalists to be at those so that we can level up and grow with you and figure out what is the future of local news for this region. And what people have been sending us messages, following us, having conversation about this, leaving survey responses. They are focusing on what they care about, what's happening in their community. They want to know the pulse. They want to know public affairs. And they are less focused on institutions. And if we are focused on what they care about, then there will be in turn more community support and more ability to strengthen all of us and be able to provide more reporting for this region and to coordinate better as well.
Thank you all very much. By the way, I'm sure most of you know this, but change is a constant. The Post-Gazette once was the Post, once the Gazette. There was the Sun Telegraph, which was the Sun, the Telegraph. There was the Pittsburgh Press, there was the Bulletin, and on and on. So this blender happens. It's hard to go through. I went through it when the Pittsburgh Press ceased. It was a seriously traumatic time for certainly all the 1,200 people who worked there, including the journalists. So I want to just dive into some other questions. We've received all sorts of them. How are we going to advertise events? How can journalism build trust with marginalized communities? How about young journalists? Jordan Chronic asks, what needs to happen to make journalism a viable career path, as was mentioned here, I think by Ron and others. Aaron Trammell, how can student journalists get involved? What about print, asks Catherine Ryan and Oliver Warson. Is there a future for print at all of any size? And Michael Arden asks, without a print paper, will there be an archived history of Pittsburgh in the future? They're all great questions. We're not going to answer most of those tonight. We are going to try and get to the concept of a viable model. But let's start with a question from science writer Ann Gibbons, and she asks, what probably is topical for many, are there any efforts to find a buyer for the Post-Gazette that you know about? And I'm going to take a stab at that since I've been doing my research, and you guys can fill me in at the end if I'm missing things. A former mayoral aide and ex-Penguins executive, Kevin Ackland, has announced, I don't think Kevin, you're not here tonight, I don't think, has announced that he wants to put together a group to buy the paper and has contacted the Block family, put out an announcement. His announcement is the first, but I don't think it will be the last. And the Blocks are not going to be in any hurry to jump at the first option they get, despite what many think. The Block family cares deeply about this area, and they've owned the paper for 99 years since William Randolph Hearst gave it to the current generation's grandfather for services rendered. So they would like to see a viable daily product under responsible community ownership continue here. On top of that, it's a family with a lot of different members and a lot of different ownership shares. So I don't think we should expect a quick decision there. We have time to plan, in other words, and put together, again, viable, responsible community ownership. So what else is happening? It's been reported that the Post-Gazette union workers are exploring an alternative, though some union members have disputed that in reports that I've seen. Additionally, various people from nonprofits have met with a group of local foundations. The Trib, as Louis said, is starting a Pittsburgh edition, Saturday, May 9th, in building that you just elucidated. Beyond that, there are unconfirmed rumors that, a couple of billionaires are going to come in and save the day. As Clarence the Angel, or Jimmy Stewart tells Clarence the Angel, money comes in handy down here, bub. So I just wanted, am I leaving out anything in terms of what's afoot? Any organized efforts that I'm not mentioning? Okay. So I'm going to dive into some other questions. And Louis, a question for you. And you probably just said how many journalists you have, right? Because I was looking at my notes. How many you guys have? About 80. Okay. That's a lot. So a question for many years, and you were in the thick of it, the Blocks and your former publisher, Dick Scaife, battled it out. The Blocks, they said they lost $350 million, and reports at the time, after Dick Scaife's death, was that he lost twice that much. Who knows what's true? The question, though, is many of us here want, there is a need for someone to move in, even despite the various mosaic pieces that can do as they, the best that we all can. There's a need. And so my question is, and I'm sure it's private information and none of my business, but in some ways, it is our civic business in this circumstance, how much of a pile of money you guys have. If it's big enough, you can be the white knight and, we can kind of put the whole thing to rest. But if it isn't, honestly, it takes money to run a paper. It takes money to figure out a plan and a runway to hopefully make profitability. So, do you guys see yourselves as having the capital and the ambition to move in and become the daily paper of record?
Wow. Be careful how I phrase this. The ambition is there, no doubt. The money, when Mr. Skate passed away in 2014, he left a pot of money for TRIB. The TRIB is currently owned by a trust. I'm not going to disclose the amount of money, but I can tell you that it's a healthy amount that, if managed wisely by our leadership, which currently is being managed very wisely and very astutely, I think it has the potential for me to be able to retire in a few years and allow a new generation of journalists to do the work that we want them to do. We have enough money that we are currently supporting a really robust scholarship and internship program, and every summer we bring on board a dozen young journalists. We pay for a big portion of their tuition. We give them jobs during the summer. We offer them a full-time job at the end of their college career. So we're doing things to promote journalism. We have to be very mindful, though, that there's a lot of sort of roadblocks, and then there's a lot of issues in the industry. The advertisers are leaving. Do you guys remember back in the day when the Sunday paper was filled with, your Macy's ads and your writing flyers, and my wife is still complaining that she doesn't get the John Eagle flyer anymore, right? And the coupons and all that. Those are all gone. And I think, Howie, you were saying something about how the consumers are changing, so we have to keep that in mind. Right now we're stepping up, and the TRIB has announced that we are publishing, starting May 9th, an edition dedicated to Allegheny County and the city of Pittsburgh. If the market supports it, we'll be willing to expand that and maybe have a paper another day of the week, 2 days a week, 3 days a week. But it depends on the support of the consumers in the market. Does that make sense? I think it does.
Good answer. Thank you. Thank you. Really, it's an important question. Adam Sorma asks what other peer markets are doing. Todd Miller asks what's the likelihood that the PG could be donated to a nonprofit as in Philadelphia. And Dan I saw you earlier, asked if there could be a mix of foundation and private sources. So let's turn to the concept of the nonprofits. Until Warren Buffett threw his money in with Bill Gates 15 or 20 years ago, this Pittsburgh region had the most philanthropic assets per capita. Now we're number 2, even though Buffett's, I think, pulled some out. We have roughly, by some counts, $15 to $20 billion worth of philanthropic assets here. We read about models across the country where newspapers are either owned by or financially supported by nonprofits and philanthropists. The biggest is Philadelphia, where after a period of tumult involving different ownership with the Inquirer and some bankruptcies, Jerry Lenfest, philanthropist, has put in $100 million, and the paper is now owned by the Lenfest Foundation, but Lens is a for-profit venture. But I would say, let's not forget that, Andy, you mentioned the last 5 years, 20 million. Back in 2011, the foundations here have been activists in this realm for a lot longer than most cities. Back in 2011, we bought the WDQ, that jazz station, wanted to see a more robust public NPR offering, and they wanted to see local news, which is what Terry's running with WESA. They also wanted to see and create a lot of investigative journalism. Anyway, with Public Source, that was the idea when Public Source was created the same year. Now that's hard to do, and Public Source, has both teams have a strong team. As to whether the foundations are happy with what they got, that's a question for them. You know, they're the unseen kind of, you know, people who have a lot of capital here that can make a lot of difference. So let's talk about nonprofits and how I'm going to, since you're at the end, I'm going to start with you with public sources. I'm going to ask you your thoughts on the ins and outs of nonprofit news and what are the strengths and weaknesses of the nonprofit model, and is public source to what degree a candidate to fill this void?
Well, I'm going to start with the strengths. And I think that is that, you know, certainly you mentioned why public source was even created, because there was a gap in a decline in investigative journalism and accountability work and overall enterprise and in-depth journalism. So we were created as a pretty small team to start to be additive to the ecosystem. Over time, we've been able, in this nonprofit model, to evolve our mission while staying true to that, to the origins of filling gaps. And I think that we've been able to see over time how they're not just gaps in in-depth and investigative journalism. There are gaps in journalism that's responsive to audiences, that is understanding how they're consuming news, that can be responsive to the types of formats they want to see, and that can look like charts and maps and data work, and as well as video and great photojournalism. And that's not inherently in-depth and investigative, but it's deep. It's still deep reporting that is, you know, telling stories in different ways and in ways that are not being told elsewhere. So we've been able to have some of that latitude to talk about how we are serving people and not be beholden to somebody who's like, you know, this is a for profit and has to be profit driven. At the same time, we do have to behave like a business and be good stewards of those investments. And that can be a challenge in an industry that changes so quickly. And I think with us and with nonprofits and frankly for-profits throughout this region, we're chronically under-resourced, and there is an ability to step in to do much more if we are able to galvanize the community. I'm not even thinking about the galvanizing just foundations or finding a billionaire. We know that if a community cares about journalism and they have subscribed to something, that even a small share of those subscribers, if they are paying for, donating to a nonprofit enterprise, it can unlock a major reporting capacity. And that's just different. There's less overhead. We have different kinds of setups than a large corporation.
Thanks. Terry, you and I spoke the other day about, and you started to get into this, about redefining what people think of when they think of the term daily paper and how that's changed. I'm curious what you think local media consumers and audiences want now and with your crystal ball into the future. And I recall you mentioning being a trusted source, an honest broker. I wonder what goes into it being a trusted source, and how can one avoid in this politically charged atmosphere being seen as on one side or the other? That's a lot of questions. You pick.
Well, first, I think one of those important things about being a trusted source is consistent, fact-based accuracy. And so if I make correct a characterization made of the foundation's efforts 15, 16 years ago with regard to WESA, the foundation, and I hope some of my foundation friends are here tonight, the foundation's paid for half of it.
They what?
They paid for half,
Yeah.
and we paid for half. And we took on millions of dollars in debt, which we have since discharged, and done it through the support of listeners like you. My staff is tired. I come out of the commercial 20 odd years ago, when I was the executive producer at KDKA Television, I was the 27-year-old kid who was supposed to tell Bill Burns what to do for a living. It did not work out. And my staff is sort of tired of hearing me bring commercial industry constructs to the non-commercial world. I think nonprofit is not a business model. Nonprofit is a tax status. We have to run our business a little differently, but we're running a business. And to quote a very wise person that I worked with some years ago, we need to run these things like businesses and not like bake sales. And that we need to bring a commercial sense to what is an enterprise that ultimately measures its success in impact on the community. So, in any case, enough of my lecture about business and what they said. I don't, going to, what does it take to be that trusted entity and to gain trust that ultimately is such a valuable commodity? It's something you earn every single day with every piece of work that you do. I mean, you earn it in every story your newsroom produces. You earn it in every application that you put into a foundation for funding. You earn it every time you stand up in front of a microphone and say, you know what? This is what we're helping to build. And this is an enterprise that is ultimately owned by you. And we promise that we are going to be, truthful and fact-based and transparent in everything that we do. And over time, if you do it well, you build a brand that can exist not just in the traditional media world where people go to seek out their news, but into that ether that we've all been sort of talking about where people get their news these days. I get it from my relatives, I get it from my friends, I get it from every place. This ether around us. We're asking citizens these days to differentiate news from noise in a place where they're bombarded by this cacophony of information. And the most important tool that we have is the ability to teach them that this brand stands for something you can believe. There are a lot of folks in this industry who distribute information for a living for their own damn purposes. And I get why they do it. I would never do that with my life. I can tell you right now that, I look at this panel, these are brands that whether you go to their website and read or whether you hear about it from a friend or you get it from the DigiWebs or wherever you get it, each of these brands carry an imprimatur with them that says this is news and not noise. And so that to me is the most important thing. Candidly, it's one of those things that when a community loses its daily newspaper, you lose that imprimatur and people then are faced with, okay, so now who do I trust? Or worse yet, I'm fortunate to live in a community that has dozens and dozens of journalistic outlets. How do I get that stuff? Do I have to go to all those how do I navigate this? It's like TV. TV was easy when you only had 4 channels. Now you got 4,000. How do you know what's on? Anybody have trouble figuring out what's on? I hope I'm not alone.
Larry, I'm going to ask you this. We're in a tough position. All that stuff's really interesting and pertinent and germane, but I'm going to ask you to wrap it up quickly. We just got so much ground to cover. Sorry.
Thank you very much, support.
What's that?
Okay. I said thank you very much. Please help.
Thanks. Honestly, with such a topic and with 8 panelists, it's and with food and drink, maybe we'll just cancel the food and drink. But I want to ask you, you've already taken care of the aspect of it. You guys are not going to kind of move into the void. But
Yeah.
when I was business editor at the Post-Gazette,
Yep.
you guys with a smaller staff, you beat us a lot, and you do a great job covering the business news. And you did back then, you do under your leadership even better. I'm just wondering, with the fact that public companies are covered by analysts and the big whatever papers across the country, the Journal and others. I mean, could you see a way if there's a new entity or something like that where they cede the ground to you all, and if that's the case, you know, you think your parent company, American City Business Journals, would say, okay, we're going to beef it up? Or conversely, could you see a partnership?
Yeah.
I mean, clearly we're trying to put puzzle pieces together here.
First, thank you for the kind words. I have very little to do with what it is that we almost record on and cover. Two of our reporters, Jordan Rodick and Dick Kowski, are here. You likely know the names of Patty Pascarella, Tim Schooley, Paul Goff, Jennifer Beam is our editor, Blake Larson's our managing editor. We have a editorial team of 9 people, including Jim Harris, our photographer. They work really hard to crank out what it is that they do, focusing on a very small piece of the community that we cover. Small in terms of numbers of people, but large in terms of impact and revenue and the people that we reach. Our parent company, American City Business Journals, owns 40 journals that look just like us, big markets and small, San Francisco, Boston, Washington, Philadelphia, mid-sized places like Pittsburgh and Kansas City, Cincinnati, Columbus, and then some smaller places like Albuquerque and Wichita and San Jose. And ultimately, they roll up to the Newhouse family. Those of you here likely know that name, Ineos Media, Condé Nast. I often joke, our budget is slightly less than Inland Tours. Don't get me wrong, 30 under 30 and C-suite awards are super fun. It is not the Met Gala, and my glasses are much smaller. So I don't know, Doug, you know, we are not a nonprofit. We are a for-profit business, and we operate as such. We have subscribers, we have advertisers, and we produce a bunch of events, and we sell tickets and sponsorships to those things that they fill with. And they help us to tell a story. You know, what is our piece of this? You know, I often joke, we had a Meet the Newsroom that we do every couple of years. And I know there's a couple of folks who were there with us this morning who are here tonight, so I apologize for the same joke. We tend to stick to what it is that we do, but we're also not dopes. You know, we do a Steelers story in September when football season starts, right? Like, we know what motivates people in this town. Do I think there's an opportunity to grow or partner? I do. What does that look like? I don't know. You know, 39 other markets haven't been in this situation. At least not in this way. You know, so that's not a great answer, but
No, it is. I mean,
it's
that's
my answer.
We're here to, you know, honestly, in part to stimulate thinking. It's our job to, you know, put the puzzle pieces together. Not just us, obviously, everybody, as has been said. So I appreciate that answer.
Yeah, sure.
You know, I have too many questions for the time, but I guess I'm going to ask Rod and Megan and Jim. I mean, what do you guys see your situations changing appreciably? Do you see any partnerships? And I'll start with you, Jim. Does this change anything for you in terms of what you're going to be doing?
Thanks for the question. I mean,
Make it concise, please.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this ever since I saw the announcement. There's a couple of ways to look at it. As I said before, in the long run, it hurts Pittsburgh. Whatever hurts Pittsburgh hurts the Pittsburgh Jewish community and makes it tougher for us in the long run. In the short run, we're all competitors, and we compete for ads, and we compete for readers, and when a competitor goes away, you have a chance to maybe grab some ads and grab some readers. But I don't really want that. I want a healthy daily paper for a healthy city. It really depends on how it plays out. I mean, we're not in a position to be the next Post-Gazette, and that's not on the table. But there are areas where on the margin we might expand, where we haven't published things because we knew the Post-Gazette would, and we'll know that we'll have to publish it because they're not doing it. And now we have to cover that court hearing, we have to cover that event that otherwise we wouldn't because the Post-Gazette did. The other thing that I'll just say, and Andy can jump all over me, but part of it depends on how the philanthropic community responds to all this. Andy has been fabulous at mobilizing the community for journalism with the Press Forward chapter of the Pittsburgh Media Partnership. And they were getting geared up to really help the whole ecosystem, all of us, big and small. If it turns out that they look at the Post-Gazette and say, boy, you've got to double down and really help this ecosystem, it could be good for us and everybody else on the panel. If, on the other hand, they say, you know what, we're going to put all our eggs in one basket, and it's so expensive to buy and resurrect the Post-Gazette, we're going to put all our money in the Post-Gazette, all of the rest of the stuff that would have otherwise come to the rest of us is going to disappear and go off the table.
Rod, quick answer.
Quick answer. Well, we have a very unique publication in the city of Pittsburgh. In and of itself, it is part of the history of Pittsburgh. So we have a rather unique claim as opposed to a generally distributed publication. At the same time, we've always had challenges that all the other media never had. We've always had to fight and create ideas to generate income to stay alive. And we are alive. And one of the things that helps us is the thought that we are evolving, constantly evolving. We don't think of ourselves necessarily as a newspaper. We think of ourselves as multimedia. We certainly have print. We have digital. We have a website. We also have sponsored events. And we also have archives. So we're doing a great number of things that have moved to our bottom line that keeps us somewhat stable in the face of competition. And believe me, I love competition because that's where some of the great ideas come from. And I don't mind telling anybody that. Keep it up, because I'll steal from you in a minute.
That's great, Rod. Megan, if you could just take a brief stab at this, we got a bunch more to cover.
Yeah, CityCast Pittsburgh is fairly young compared to most of my panelists. We offer a free daily newsletter and podcast, and the mission of our company is a little bit different, not unlike the network described by Evan. The Business Times, we exist in multiple cities. We're the brainchild of the Graham family that once owned the Washington Post. We are in every way an experiment. We are for-profit, but we also don't take any nonprofit money. Like we're not asking the foundations for anything. That's just not part of what we do. We are built on the spirit of collaboration. I have been so lucky in my career. Actually, a lot of this is really a credit to Terry, the experiment of the Confluence, as it was, the daily news show that was at WESA, which taught me how to do audio. Now I talk into a microphone for a living. That was your idea, and the whole idea of it was to talk to journalists and newsmakers and politicians and everyone, and to get them in a room and give them a few minutes to say it in their own words in a way that a soundbite or a news story can't necessarily articulate. I get to do that now at a new outlet with the Confluence no longer around. But it's my great privilege to be able to interview folks from all of these outlets and many of your organizations, with the exception actually of WESA. Terry, I would love to have your folks on CityCast anytime. So that's an open invitation really to anyone. But to answer your question, no, we're not trying to step up and fill that void, but we are desperately protective of what it means to have the Post-Gazette and to have a healthy journalism system and communication system, because so many of our reporters in town become the communications professionals and executives at our colleges and our hospitals. That's vital to us and who we are, and CityCast gets to benefit from it just by virtue of being an on-demand, free medium designed to help people feel more connected to their community in a time when people don't feel connected at all and are often scared. And it's such a joy to get to step into that space. I'm not trying to be the Post-Gazette. If I'm filling any void, it's to help you feel like this city belongs to you.
Oh, then that's, it's a great component piece. I'm going to ask two more questions. And these questions are becoming amalgamated questions. I'm not convinced personally, that given the right runway and community partnerships, a new entity couldn't find its way to profitability. I've run a small magazine for 20 years. It's small, but it's been profitable every year. I mean, it would be great if someone came forth with $100 million as in Philly. But with the accelerating pace of change, is it necessary or even wise to put anything near that much money into a big fund that funds something allegedly in perpetuity when there's so much change happening? So I'm just throwing this out to anyone who wants to answer. Would the money be better spent coming up with enough to do a 5-year plan, ensuring that those in charge of the business and perhaps the journalistic end too adapt to market and technological changes? What do you guys think of that? Anyone want to take a stab? Kerry?
That isn't an option. I mean, that is the practical reality of what's going to happen. And we know, certainly those of us who have spent time at the foundations know that they are not in a mood to write huge checks with no guarantee of return and with an expectation that they will be expected to do nothing more than continue to write huge checks. Again, I think there's a reasonable expectation of us as journalistic enterprises, for-profit, non-profit. There's a reasonable expectation that we need to be able to sustain ourselves. And if the work that we do and the journalism we produce is valuable enough, we have to be smart enough to monetize it.
Amen.
Okay.
I mean, seriously.
That's a perfect answer, Evan. Thanks. Next, I'm just kidding. Yeah, and go ahead, Evan.
No, all I was going to say is, and you touched upon, I've been in this shop for 8.5 years. It is not terribly expensive to subscribe to Pittsburgh Business Times. And when you buy, what the offer is. The number of people, many people all the way, and they say, I can't read your story. It's behind the paywall. Right? Do you give your product and service away for free? You do not. We have to pay reporters. We have to pay people. We have to pay our rent. We have to do that, right? It is a business. And let's face it, the dailies, not just the Post-Gazette, the dailies en masse relate to that game. They relate to it. I'm not offended if you're not a subscriber, but don't bitch to me about it either. Like, I know how much you spend in a coffee tree at Starbucks, for God's sakes. I don't drink coffee, right? Like, I mean, it's worth it to you or it's not. And if it's not, that's cool.
If I may add,
Please.
live is free. We don't charge. We don't have a paywall. But that's not my point. What I want to talk about is that consumers are changing, and we have to acknowledge that, right? So we talk a lot about having a daily paper. What does that look like? I think the Post-Gazette currently prints 2 days a week. So I think what we need to keep in mind, though, is that the way we consume news is different. We put up our phones and we start scrolling. We're not necessarily going to a daily paper the way I was when I was a print journalism student at Duquesne. So we need to keep that in mind. That's super important, and make sure that we understand the habits of the consumers. And I think earlier you were asking what are consumers reading. You guys will be surprised. You love the Steelers, right? I mean, sports is people can't get enough of it. It drives our traffic every single day. Steelers,
About obits.
Pardon me?
Obituaries.
They do sometimes, yeah.
Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the knee-jerk response when the City Paper and Post-Gazette announcement came out was, let's build something new. We should have the Baltimore banner in Pittsburgh. Glenfest should come to Pittsburgh and spend $100 million here. I don't think that's the right answer. I mean, it's not the right question in the first place. The question should be, can we save a certain platform? The question should be, can we ensure that everyone in Pittsburgh has easy access to local news and information? And I think, thank you. And that starts with acknowledging that there are already these resources here. Why would we go and spend $50 million to stand up something new, to build a new brand, to put all these people in?
And I think, Andy,
Where are all these outlets already exist? Already here.
there's a takeaway, I think, tonight is that we can all agree that we're not living in a news desert. Is that?
Yeah.
Great. So when you talk about investing money and how much and where it comes from, I'm also not a journalist. I am a student on truth and advertising. And in my business career, this is the hardest business I've ever worked in as a business. And the reason is the technology destroy the traditional economic base, but the technology keeps on changing. Every month, there's some new development from the technology companies that changes how it works and how we can reach people and how we can make money. It's really, really hard. And that makes it really hard for someone to invest any amount of money, whether it's a large sum or a small number, because you really don't know where it's going. Andy, to his credit, at Newsapalooza, which is a great meeting, you should all be going to Newsapalooza every year in the fall. He had a study from 2 Pitt researchers, where you get your news. Where do you get your news? And they showed these graphs, and there's this incredibly clear relationship to age. The oldest people in Pittsburgh, get their news from traditional news sources. As you start to move down from people in their 70s and the 60s into the 60s and the 50s, they don't get it from there. They get it from Facebook. And as you keep on going down into the 40s and the 30s, they get it from Instagram. And when we go down from the 30s and in the 20s, they get their news from TikTok. And that's the environment in which we have to live.
TikTok is dictating that we're moving on to the last question. And how are you going to be first? So I'm going to ask everyone a simple final question. And that is, do you want to see the PG or a new daily paper grow out of the ashes? If so, how would you do it? How much money is needed? Or as one of our question askers, Tim Madel asks, if you were launching a Pittsburgh news organization today from scratch, what form would it take? Who would it be for? In short, all of this, what's your solution to the situation? Let's try and, keep it at 2 minutes. Speak in code.
So I think what we're actually facing is a set of overlapping gaps. And in coverage areas, access, trust, and representation, and all of these things actually existed before this last month. And so I feel like there's a risk of oversimplifying this loss and responding with nostalgia instead of addressing the real structural needs of journalism, many of which have been laid out here today. The chronic under-resourcing of what we're doing and the challenge that we have in keeping up with how people are changing how they relate to news. We have to, if we are doing our job, meet people in the different platforms and in the different ways that they want to see that. I think, what Public Source can do, what we are already being called to do by many in this region is to expand, is to step into, culture, the actual experience of living in this region, to do also more public affairs reporting, community pulse type of work so that people know what's happening. And with that, accountability. When you have people out there and there's eyes on what's going on, you have the benefits that I think everybody here wants as taxpayers and people who are invested in this region. We can do that, and we are not saying that we're the only ones who can step up in this. We want to do this intentionally, collaboratively, and in a way that puts you first, in a way that we know that we are serving you. And again, I just have to say, we're going to be hosting this You Have the Floor listening session series, and more details are coming on that soon. So please go to publicsource.org, follow our newsletter and our social media, and we'll be getting those details out, and I hope that we'll be seeing all of you.
Great. Thanks, Hallie. Evan, I'm sorry, Hallie took 1 of your minutes, so you're going to have 1 minute. No, I'm just kidding.
I wish.
Well, the food and drink is waiting. So.
I wish Luis well.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think, seriously, like I'm not here to say I don't think the Post-Gazette or something else should be stood up. But Luis and his colleagues are in place, and I'm hopeful, and I would ask this audience to give them a chance and support them. Right? That is a path, and that is a step. And perhaps it's the easier step, if you will. We are in the news business. We at the Business Times are in the business intelligence business. That's really what we do. That's the lens as to how we look at things every day. So I don't know if it should be stood up. I think it's a big investment. And if the model as it is currently there, if it's broken, I'm not sure why you would want to stand up something that is broken. It needs to be fixed, or somebody else needs to fill the void, and perhaps Luis and his colleagues. I gave you 30 seconds.
Terry, keep it brief, please.
Oh, now you're.
Not just you. It's everywhere. I'm going to say it, Devin. It's going to get worse.
If there were an answer, if there were a silver bullet, somebody would have already written it down, copyrighted it, and it would have made $1 billion just re-syndicating it. There is no one answer. And I think one of the messages that you've heard tonight that is really, really important is that this is not a desert. There are options here. I think sometimes, I know my organization, we do a particularly bad job of communicating sort of where we intend to be in 10 or 20 years and what do we really do. We talk well to the audiences we have, but we don't talk to audiences at large. Well, we're going to do a little more of that. I think Pittsburgh and this region need to be reminded that these resources are all there and that my newsroom and your newsroom and your newsroom, we all intend to be here for a long, long time. And so it's incumbent on us to make sure that the people of Pittsburgh, who, by the way, are about stage 2 into the 7 stages of Kubler-Ross's death and dying with regard to the Post-Gazette, we need to tell them that hope is not lost. My newsroom's going nowhere. It's not getting bigger. And I think that's the goal we all have. And, you know, fingers crossed and maybe a little bit of investment somewhere, then, you know, we make that happen. But we are going no place.
Amen. Alec, for name.
Okay, the other woman up here. Jerry, once again, keep on someone to elevate. I'm always happy to have you, and I say lots.
What do you have to say? We're food's waiting.
In my dream world, somebody could buy the Post-Gazette, keep its assets, keep its brand, keep its archives, and keep that history going. If you started from a business perspective, that no one would want to step into that, knowing what's happening with the union and the folks that don't support it. That said, I think there's another opportunity that could be born from its ashes. I would point everyone here to the Daily Memphian. Now, I'm a native Tennessean. I'm a subscriber of the Memphian. I love them very much. But I think their business model makes so much sense. And for a place like Pittsburgh, they're 50% subscriptions. They are for-profit. They have a paywall. They're 25% advertising, 20% foundation support, and 5% ancillary. When I was devastated by this news, I turned to an organization that makes sense to me on paper, and the journalism is excellent. It is an outlet of record. That was their mission from the start, and they've really managed to keep it up. I started subscribing because of sports content, because try finding a basketball fan in this town. But I stuck around, and I know more about the city that raised me now because I'm a subscriber of that paper. Here's an opportunity here for that, and it was easy to become a subscriber. After 2 articles, paying $1 each via Venmo, it asked me, hey, you want to spend $5 for a subscription for 3 months? And I did it from my phone in a matter of 3 seconds. Those models exist. And by the way, they started that organization out of the ashes of the commercial appeal. Another Strix paper, the first job I had out of college. They did it with $7 million, not 100. That was their loading dose, was $7 million, $2 million from a single investor, $5 million from a group of them. And they also managed to do it without having to sign up for some of the organizations, some of the foundations in the nation that do amazing journalism work, but they ask you to ramp up pretty quickly.
That's a great insight.
There are opportunities here, and it doesn't have to be too far for a couple.
All right, Luis. Haven't already said what your thing, so we're going to, no, just kidding.
First of all, I did not pay Evan. But honestly, I think the more I think about it as I sit here, at the end of the day, what we all care about is telling good stories, right? You want to have stories that you can text to your family members and you talk about, did you read that story? And I think we have a great ecosystem in the city of Pittsburgh of really good journalists who are doing great work. I invite you to give it a try. Give a try to those of us who are still doing it or who will continue to do it. And we, I think, have some really honestly, some of the best journalists in Pittsburgh. One of them is actually a former PG reporter, Paul Ward, who is actually working on a series that will start in about a week. I can't tell you what it is, but it's going to blow your mind. It's going to be a 5-part series, and it's really the type of story that we should all care about and be talking about. So at the end of the day, that's what I care about. That's why I became a journalist, because I want to tell the story.
Amen. Thank you, Luis. Rod?
All right, since your question was somewhat of a supposition in your absence of media in general, I'll start with this. Nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm. Now, that enthusiasm, generally speaking, comes from within the individual. But I would also look externally. What's the enthusiasm in the public? What are they going after? Then I would look at what their enthusiasm is all about, and I would follow that and create something that reaches them more directly. That's what I would do.
Thank you very much, Ron. Andy?
Doug, first, let me say thank you to you for convening this. You do a great job when you come down. I feel deep affection for everyone on this panel and for many of my journalism friends in the audience. But honestly, what happens with local news is going to be driven by the audience. It's the people out here in this audience who are going to choose who they follow, who they pay, what they support, and that's where the journalism will go.
All right, Jim. This is it.
This is it.
Very good.
Stand between you and food and drink. So, I mean, as I think it's become clear, there's nobody in the current Pittsburgh ecosystem that realistically has an opportunity to completely fill the type of void that the Post-Gazette leaves as the comprehensive, universal paper of record in this community, with the possible exception of the Tribune Review, which remains to be seen whether they actually end up doing that or not. And then if not that, then hopefully somebody will step forward like Mr. Lindfest did in Philadelphia. And I would not expect them to try and reproduce or resurrect the Post-Gazette as is from a business standpoint. Because there are, as has been mentioned here, there are some daily newspapers of record in some cities around the country which claim to have innovated with the technology and the audience behavior changes to be profitable. Some with a degree of foundation support, some without. But, you know, among those is the Salt Lake City, and frankly, Philadelphia claims that they are now profitable with a fairly small amount of foundation support. So I would not try to resurrect the Post-Gazette as from a business standpoint, the way it was, but there could be a way forward. That's the best I can say, and you can all join me in saying amen.
Well, I want to thank the panel. I hope you all have enjoyed this. I've found it very enlightening, and it's a step along the way. I think it's been terrific. Thank you all very much. I'm going to say that all of you who brought your coats up here, the coat racks, have been moved to the first floor where the food and drink is ready for us. So thank you all for coming.